Ace Podcast.
What is up, everybody? Once again, and as always, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Irrational Fears and for another episode of 31 Days of Horror. We have got a special guest today for our second What Scares Us episode. I am your co-host, Anthony Luciano. This is my wonderful wife,
Amanda Luciano.
and that
Sound
spooky
effects
motherfucker
provided
in the
by-
background is our good friend, Mr. Robbie Palmer from the Nerdynomicon Podcast.
Any of the above will work. What's up, guys? How you doing?
Oh, so fucking good. How are you doing?
Sexy good over here, man. Sexy
good. He
I like the
said.
sound of that. So, if you're coming over from Nerdynomicon, this is part 2 to episode proper. This is episode
Hell yeah.
more proper. It's far less proper. I'm lying. This is episode fucking like we're just winging it.
We took the proper off. This is just episode.
There's nothing proper about this.
Goddamn right. And if you are just here to listen to us, let's just stop this fucking episode now, go over to Nerdynomicon, listen to part 1, and then come right back over here to finish up the entire saga.
For the sequel.
That's the good.
The good.
So, for you guys who've never heard of What Scares Us before, we're going to talk about some shit that scares us, if you couldn't fucking guess. And then I will do a dry reading of a short story that Robbie wrote based around his fear, so that we can kind of see like what is scary about it. I'm really good at
if
this.
that explanation didn't really fucking paint the picture for you, basically, Robbie has provided the fear we will discuss today. He's also provided a story around that fear that Anthony will narrate at the end of this episode, live as it gets. It'll be a one take. Yeah. So let's get started. Robbie, do you want to tell us what scares?
Oh, I am a fearful motherfucker. Like, there's so much that scares me. And to be fair, lots of my fears could be actually considered as irrational. And I'm not just wording it that way because of this show. But I have a lot of fears that really could be considered irrational. Like, to this day, my best friends, my wife, Holly from 5 at 5 over at the Nerdynomicon YouTube show, everybody picks on me because I'm terrified of mirrors. But that is not the fear that I gave you guys. So I can't shut up about it just because I'm a proud papa. I talk about my kid quite a bit. I talk about a lot of the... Oh, thank you. I talk about the joys of fatherhood. I talk about the annoyances of fatherhood, and there are several. But there's a lot that comes with it. And one of my major fears over time, or rather, in the last, he's about 1.5 years old. So within the last 1.5 years is baby monitors. Baby monitors really, really, really freak me out.
And it's something you can't get away from when you've got a little one. That's the best part.
No, it's not. I mean, especially when they're brand new. You know what I mean? We had Max in our bedroom for a few months just because my wife was terrified of SIDS, irrationally, in my opinion. But, SIDS is a thing. So she kept him in there in our bedroom a little bit longer than was, probably necessary. And part of that was because I was too fucking lazy to get the nursery around. So when we did, we got the baby monitor in there. And I have heard stories about people being able to hack into baby monitors and have their voices just kind of come through. Like, you're just sitting there watching TV, the baby's asleep in the other room, and all of a sudden, I'm in the house. And just try to scare the shit out of parents. I didn't experience anything like that, but I've heard weird things over the baby monitor. The brand that we've got, it sits there just purely silent until a noise happens in the room, and it's almost like it's noise activated. So all of a sudden you'll just hear a click, and then you'll just hear a little bit of this static, and you'll just hear just random sounds in the room. And the higher volume you have it, it seems like the more you can hear at that point. Like, I didn't realize that Max turned the volume all the way up the other day, and I'm just kind of laying in the other room after he went down for a nap. I'm like, what the fuck is that sound? What is that sound? What the fuck is that sound? I like burst in and then dead sprinted all the way to the door and then slowly, quietly, silently walked in. Oh, that sound is the ceiling fan. I'm a douche. But
God.
it sounds very discombobulated and very
just kind of like garbled, noisy.
yeah,
like not
yeah,
right.
exactly. It sounds like something David Lynch would use as a sound effect in the Red Room in Twin Peaks.
It's so funny. It's almost like Ant was subconsciously getting ready for this episode because he had a nightmare about this last night.
Yeah.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling me?
Oh, absolutely. So it was one of those things. I didn't have a lot of detail like going on because I don't know why the fuck I had a baby monitor. I think it was just because I knew that we were gonna come into this or something. And just like you mentioned, like you get those clicks and those pops, and after a while in my dream, it just seemed like normal. You know, like the clicks and the pops didn't bother me. But then I heard some whispering going on through the monitor. So I got a little closer to it and I turned it up. And it was somebody fucking talking to the baby that I had in the other room. And as it it got kind of clearer and clearer, I realized that the person was fucking quote. I don't know if it was quoting or if it was actually fucking Busta Rhymes in the baby's room. He was like, I don't know. It freaked me out. Like I had Busta Rhymes in my baby's room talking into my baby monitor, and it scared the shit out of me.
Did MJ text you?
No. Why? Do you ask?
Did you just say Busta Rhymes was in the baby's room?
Yes.
And MJ didn't text you?
No. Who?
You lying piece of shit.
He won't tell me why. I need to know.
We were talking about Halloween Resurrection and how Busta Rhymes was probably the worst part of that movie. Great concept, horrible execution for that film. And one of the worst parts is the casting of Busta Rhymes. And neither one of us could really pinpoint if he was doing anything anymore, like if he's still rapping or if he's still towering above small villages waiting for their blood sacrifice to his giantness. But I kind of didn't want to give him any internet hits and look him up on Wikipedia because I don't want to be that guy. Because I don't actually care, but I'm curious. So it's like, oh my God.
Featured on a couple tracks here and there.
Bit.
So MJ was like, oh, well, you're going to be recording with Irrational Fears. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing an episode. They're going to come on and then we're going to do a part 2. All right, I need to text them. They need to know about Busta Rhymes. I'm like, oh. God, why?
Oh, I can't wait to hear all about it.
Oh, man. You had me on the edge of my seat, too. You had me, man.
I was like, how can I get this naturally into the conversation? I got
Dude,
this. It's perfect.
That was like a sad hand job. It's like it's getting me there, and then the payoff was just droopy, yet satisfying.
See,
oh, boy.
It was worth it. It was all worth the build-up.
Oh, it all built to something. Not where I thought it was going to go.
Did you say that you busted a rhyme?
But
bars. Oh man. Anyways, back on
so
track.
You're scared of things, baby monitor things,
Yes.
and So actually, the first question that we had for you, you kind of answered a little bit, but it was, when were you first aware that this terrified you? And was it like a certain event that led to it, or it just was like an uneasy feeling that built?
It was actually kind of a slow build. I didn't realize that baby monitors would freak me out to the degree that they do, to the point where they actually do kind of flat out scare me now. I didn't realize that was going to be the case until I had Max, or rather, Brooke had Max. I just kind of lucked into it. You know, I was just there to watch and catch the kid. Yeah. So, I didn't realize that was going to be the case. Baby monitors, I've seen them being used multiple times throughout, my life, because I'm a lifelong horror fan. And, I've heard creepypastas about them. I've seen them used in movies. I've read about them in books. I've always thought that they were cool, but they never really scared me until they really started scaring me. So, as a matter of fact, can I tell you guys a story? There's some context that if you want, I'll get into in a couple of minutes, but this happened probably about a week ago, and it's on the subject of baby monitors.
Bring it on.
So, Brooke had a kind of weird experience. She swears to God she was drifting off to sleep and she felt someone touch the back of her neck. So she's in a really weird place. She's kind of freaked out, but she ends up drifting off to sleep and has a terrible nightmare. And I passed out in the office, as I'm wont to do, with a laptop on my lap, and it's October, so a horror movie on the television. So she comes in at about 2 o'clock. She's pale as anything, and she says, "Babe, do you mind waking your ass up and coming to bed? Because I just had a really bad nightmare and I kind of don't want to be alone." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." So I come in. So we're both just kind of snuggling down. We got the blankets over top of us, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we just hear through the baby monitor. And both of us sit right up, and I'm freaked out. I'm like, "What is that? What is that?" So I dead sprint to the baby's room, burst in. This time I did not actually attempt to be quiet or anything like that. I burst in. If somebody's going to be fucking with my kid, I'm going to catch them red-handed. Max is standing in his crib right next to where the baby monitor is, staring at it, trying to understand it, breathing right in front of it, and drinking his juice while looking at it.
He was just fucking enjoying the show, whatever was going on.
He was enjoying the show.
October.
Like, I had to wonder if that was just my spawn, knowing that it's October, everyone deserves one good scare, or if he was just trying to understand what in God's name is this yellow thing that has a little light that beeps on it. And then he looks at me and points at it and goes, "Yellow!" So I'm pretty sure it was the latter, but I like to think it's just my spawn showing his horror roots. Already trying to scare his dad.
Don't let him
that happened
know
about a
how
week
bad
and
it
a half
scared
ago. Oh, you can't, dude. You can't give them that kind of power. Once they know they have the upper hand, they'll always use it against you.
God.
So I guess that kind of leads into our next question. Obviously, you have a young child that still requires a baby monitor. How does this impact you day to day? Are you like, when you're alone with Max and he's going down for a nap, are you like sweating when you have to sit down with the baby monitor, or how is that on the daily?
I'm not sweating every time I have to put him down, mostly because when he goes down for naps, it's usually with me. Like, when he takes nap time at home, I'm usually home with him during the weekends. I'm working during the day, he's at daycare. He usually falls asleep, like, on the couch, hanging out with me, or, in the bed watching a TV show. We kind of have a round when nap time is going to be, and that's my cue where I can pop up, do a little bit of work and stuff. So that doesn't bother me. At night, on the other hand, it's always kind of in the back of my mind because I've had multiple incidents that have freaked me out. So it doesn't give me cold sweats and whatnot. As a matter of fact, I try to put it out of my mind, but every once in a while, like maybe every hour and a half or so, I'll just kind of look over at the baby monitor and just kind of stare at it for a second and then go back to whatever it is I'm doing.
You don't want to kind of like build that like that fear in your head and make it real.
Right.
Where like him snoring or something fucking scares the shit out of you or something like that. I can see that.
Which has happened. That happened. That one didn't happen to me. That one happened to Brooke because both of us kind of have this fear. But for me, it's a little bit more pronounced because I'm so entrenched in the horror community. Being a writer myself, working on a fictionalized horror podcast, friends with you guys. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly listening to you guys narrating. You guys freak the shit out of me with some of your shows, man. God damn it.
You're welcome.
But, well, thank you. Seriously, I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. but she has a much more primal, animalistic, natural fear, whereas mine tends to be much more on the irrational side, where she gets scared of, oh my God, somebody broke into the house, they're hiding in my son's room and they're going to kill our baby. I have much more of there's a disembodied voice. I remember watching Insidious. I'm going to walk in and there's going to be a weird faced dude on the other side of the curtain.
It's so true. That I have all the same fears she does.
Yeah.
Like things like that. And Aunt would be like, what if it's a ghosty?
See, you guys understand. Her fears are far more rational. They're far more grounded in the day-to-day real life possibilities. You know what I mean? You turn on ID Discovery, you want to get freaked out, do that. Mine, I don't really think that they're that irrational because I do believe in ghosts. I've had several experiences in my life. I believe in the paranormal. I'm a big proponent and a big quoter of the Shakespearean line, there is more in heaven and earth, or there are more things in heaven and earth than in all of your religions and philosophy. I do believe in the paranormal and the otherworldly.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm also a realist, and I also believe that there's a much higher chance that something more natural would do my kid harm, if anything.
Right.
You know, so she's far more rational. I'm kind of crazy.
It's funny, actually.
Still scares me.
Or I guess aunt's sister, so my technically sister-in-law, but I call her my sister.
Technically.
I call her my sister. She has a 3.5, or she's about to be 4. She's about to be 4?
I don't know. We shouldn't have this. I'm going to edit this part out because I don't know. This is terrible.
No, hold on. She was 3 last year. Yeah, she's about to be 4.
Yeah, her second birthday was when we started dating.
Sorry.
Her
She's
first
about
birthday
to
was when we
be.
started dating.
She's about to be 3 because Jen told me she'd almost be 4 when she gets the next summer.
There you go.
I'm inclined to believe Amanda.
Yes.
Yeah,
so she's turning 3 in a month. Sorry, it's easy to lose track when they're toddler age, but we found our way. But she, on her, I've been over several times to hang out with, sister, we'll call her, and her little girl talks to herself while she's in for nap time.
Oh yeah, she sings "Happy Birthday" to fucking nothing.
It's so creepy.
While she's in for nap time,
weird.
Does she do it while she's asleep, or does she do it as kind of like a soothing down ritual?
No, she'll like lay down for a while and then she'll stand up and stare at the corner, and not the corner where the camera is, like a different one, and sing "Happy Birthday," and like just talk about different things, like random things about like letters or shapes, or just like she's telling someone something.
Oh, and it's one of the video baby monitors, if you didn't catch that too.
Yeah.
So it's
I caught it, and I don't know if that's scarier or less scary than just having the auditory, because Max has some words down and I'll just hear him waking up for a nap, hear the binky pop out and just go, right there, right there. Hello. And then I'll walk in. He's pointing at the closet. And I'll walk in. He just looks at me, beams from ear to ear. Dada, right there. Hello. And on more than one occasion, probably on more than 20 occasions, I've opened the closet and I've searched it top to bottom, and there is nothing there.
I think the only solution is that he just doesn't need a closet anymore. So you just put a wall up.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
There has been a point where I have thought about taking the door off the tracks just to make sure that there's no hiding places, period. And Brooke put a kibosh on that real quick. So,
this
so listen to me, we're not crazy people. I'm like, but ghosts, we're not crazy people. Go in there and do your podcast.
Speak for yourself, sweetheart. We're not crazy people.
That's right. So, yeah, I understand exactly what you guys are saying completely. I don't know if that is scarier or less scary, having the video component where you can actually see what they're doing. Because there's always that possibility in the back of my mind while thinking about that. Like, I'm envisioning your story as you guys are telling that. What if you see something silently responding back? That's the key thing.
I can't imagine, honestly. I don't.
Well, somebody's having nightmares tonight. This is perfect. Mission accomplished.
So that leads us to our last question, Robert. What is what's the scariest or worst or like most frightening thing you have seen or heard on a baby monitor? Or what was the incident that was like the big incident for you?
Okay. Well, this is actually kind of a lead into my story. I wrote this story when I was having a little bit of writer's block. Well, I started writing some more short stories because I've been writing my whole life. I was having some writer's block trying to finish up the first season of the horror story that I'm writing. It's a horror podcast, which, by the way, I'm going to be talking to you guys about a lot more as well. So there was one night in particular, and my wife, incidentally, and this has all the trappings of horror written all over it, but I promise you that this is a true story. My wife was off on business. She was sent to South Carolina to take care of some cell phone sites for her day job. And I'm in the other room, incidentally, working on a show and watching a horror movie. That night in particular, it was The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and I was eating pizza.
That's a good one.
And I had the movie up. Oh, it was fantastic, wasn't it?
I was talking about pizza, but the movie's good too.
Oh, touche. So I had the baby monitor up a little bit louder than usual because I had the movie on full blast because I was downstairs. You know, there's no reason to keep it quiet in the upstairs. I've got it on downstairs. And I just happen to look over at the baby monitor and I see the lights start to go up, which means that there's noises being made. So I pause the movie and I start to hear some raspy sounds coming over the baby monitor. And it wasn't very audible, but the more I listened to it, the more it sounded like I could pick out some words. And have you ever heard something at such a volume and so raspy and so low quality that you have a hard time discerning if they're words that are actually being said or if your brain is trying to make sense of the jumbled noises?
Yeah.
It's like all too often. I don't know why, but all too often, yeah. I
Right.
talk in my sleep a lot, so I feel like that's a normal occurrence for this one.
He said
So-
that's a conversation for another time, but he said some weird shit in his sleep.
I will make sure that I bring earbuds and a stuffed animal to cuddle up to as I lay there terrified when I get invited to the Irrational Fears Pajama Jam. So
right.
thank you for the heads
That
up.
was a secret. Now everybody knows. We weren't ready to announce it yet.
Hashtag Irrational Fears Pajama Jam. It's a thing. So I'm sitting there and my legs started to become like rubbery because I'm hearing this rasping coming across and it keeps on sounding like somebody saying his name, like his full name. Maximus. And it's never the same length. They're different lengths, like they're saying his name, like trying to wake him up and then just stretching it out. And I ran as quickly as I could upstairs after I was able to, realize what was happening. And I fell down the stairs. My legs were like jelly. And then I realized that if there was something up there, I'm just running up with literally no pants on, barefoot and everything like that. So I grabbed a baseball bat and I ran upstairs and just slowly inched my way in because if anybody was there, I didn't want them to try to find a way to hide or try to find a way to like go out the window or anything like that. And all he was doing was just breathing very, very low. There was some extra rasp in there because his dehumidifier had run out of water. The ceiling fan was going full speed. And just all the noises combined, like maybe he was rasping in his sleep, maybe he was snoring, but it sounded like a voice. And here's the thing. We've experienced a ghost in this house. My brother-in-law took his own life a couple of years ago. And ever since then, we've experienced kind of weird things in the house. Like, I've seen someone sitting in a chair out of the corner of my eye, didn't even think a thing about it. Then Brooke would come through the door a moment later. Then I'll like look back at the chair and there's nothing there. Like what I know I saw was not there. And I've heard things. Like I said, Brooke thought she felt someone touch the back of her neck a couple of nights ago. So, I mean, it's a possibility that maybe her brother just wanted to say hi or something like that. Look out for him. But we've definitely experienced some things, but I've never heard anything as auditory like that. I've seen shadows. I've felt feelings. Things have been moved. Doors have been shut. You know, we've heard doors slamming when there's nobody upstairs, period. And I know that there's nobody upstairs, period, because Brooke makes me go room to room checking every fucking corner. Which, again, rational. Me, not so much. So
You're like, ghosts don't hide in corners. Jesus.
She's like, well, check the other room. Ghosts don't go through walls, idiot. They're not fire. So... So, like I said, we've experienced a couple of things. You can believe me or not believe me. That's totally up to you. I mean, lots of people are skeptical about ghosts, which I understand. I can only speak to the experiences that I've had. You know, There's a lot of things that I would love to say, yes, I do believe in them. But unfortunately, it's just on that side of probably not, you know?
Yeah, I could talk for fucking hours about paranormal experiences.
We should do an episode like that because Ant's experienced some really crazy shit, and I've had my own as well. I'd say that we do definitely believe.
Yeah, I've had fire extinguishers thrown at me from across the fucking room before. We could talk about that for a while.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah,
I mean, even my own mother, she's been an RN for almost 40 years at Schuyler Hospital in the Finger Lakes, and she's told me ghost stories about I believe it's a different unit entirely now, but where the old ICU used to be. She's told me ghost stories about that. She's named the names of the people there and told the story in front of them. They'll corroborate all of the events, but if you ask them point blank, oh no, I don't believe in ghosts. And I don't understand the logic behind that. I mean, paradoxically, I believe that more people experience the paranormal than even realize it or are willing to admit it, as well as I believe that a lot of the people that go on and on and on about all these ghost stories and blah, 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 are at least in part embellishing what truly happened, if not making it up. You know, I actually believe that both are happy mediums as to what the truth truly is. Because I do believe that there's entities out there, but I'm getting way off topic here. The point of the matter is, that night in particular scared the shit out of me, and that stuck with me and really bothered me for a couple of days. As a matter of fact, that night, I didn't finish the movie for probably another 3 hours. I actually sat in Max's room, just in a rocking chair that Brooke still has to this day in that corner, just listening and watching him sleep and just making sure that everything was all right. You know, just listening to some of the sounds that was going on just because I wanted to make sense to what I heard in my head. So that was probably the worst experience that I've had with them. And he's still a baby, so there will probably be more experiences.
Got plenty of time to top that one.
I hope you're wrong. I really do.
I was going to say, I can't wait to hear about it, but for your sake, I hope I don't.
This episode definitely makes me want to do like a ghost stories episode, though.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. I think we're gonna make that happen soon. So get ready for that.
Yes, but before we go,
if you guys want me to come on, I mean, I've got a bunch, and I can bring on people to corroborate some of these stories too.
Yes,
into it.
No, that's happening. So get ready for that.
Robbie, tell everybody where they can find you and what you're doing.
Oh, you guys can find me wherever you listen to podcasts, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, anywhere. Just search for the Nerdynomicon. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all over the place, all Nerdynomicon. Facebook.com/Nerdynomicon, Twitter @Nerdynomicon. And we've also just recently started up our YouTube page. So there's a lot of cool shows that we've got over there. All the podcast episodes are on there. We've got a new series called The New Batch, where myself, Holly, Brooke, and some other some other friends of ours from other podcasts, like Back Issues Comic Book Podcast, Synthaholics. They come on and we're reviewing all of the brand new shows that come out each season. And it sounded a lot funner in theory, and then I realized, oh shit, I actually have to watch The Good Doctor.
Like, there's some really bad TV shows out there.
It's like, I'm all excited, saying, we should do this, and we could do that, and we can make all this stuff funny, and I'm going to start out with the Orville, and I've got all these ideas. Oh, wait a minute. This is my idea, and I actually have to watch The Good Doctor. God damn it. But we've got a bunch more shows that we're ready to do over there. So, Nerdynomicon, anywhere you guys want to find free, fun content.
Oh, yeah, we'll have tons of links in the show notes also, so you don't have to do too much manual work. I'll take care of that for you.
Just like Episode Proper, I love that you say show notes.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it's wonderful.
They're the notes for the show.
But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Robbie, and I'm sure it won't be the last time that we get this group together.
No,
I have no doubt. I'm still looking forward to the Pajama Jam.
Yeah, that episode's coming later on down the road.
Right on,
That's
man.
for another website. Okay.
Irrational Fears After Dark.
Hey,
Boy.
that's where it's at. So, once again, and as always, thanks for joining us for Irrational Fears. I've been your co-host, Anthony Luciano.
And Amanda Luciano, another co-host on
Damn right.
other side.
And that's been our good friend, Mr. Robbie Palmer from Nerdynomicon. Thanks again, my friend. And we will get this narration underway.
Right on, man. I hope you guys enjoy.
Coming up next.
Pew, 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 pew. I don't have sound effects.
Wow, 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 wow.
Dun, dun, dun!
Having a child isn't as easy as I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong, I expected the dirty diapers and late nights. I expected to forget to shower out of exhaustion or cook healthy meals. I can't tell you how many times I resorted to just making us frozen pizza in the first 2 months. Convenience won out over conscientiousness probably too many times. I even, to a degree, expected the exhaustion-fueled nights with my wife Kayla. What I didn't expect was how vicious the fighting would get. I do 90% of the work, she would yell. Naturally, I'd retort by pointing out that she's full of shit. Names would be called, threats would be made. On and on the fighting would go until one or the other left the room. The one that stayed, obviously the winner. I lost a lot. I'm not saying this to belittle my wife or our relationship, which in my opinion is quite good. I'm merely trying to set the scene. One more important fact is that I'm a smoker, and as a result, am prone to coughing in the middle of the night. That, coupled with my incessant teeth grinding, makes me a rather frustrating person to sleep next to. That was in the best of times. With a baby in the mix and every hour of sleep precious, my knowledge of my sleeping habits kind of started to weigh on me. Kayla was always understanding about how loud I was as a sleeper in the past, but I could tell that it was becoming a bit too much to bear. When our son was born, the days were blissful, myself feeling like the happiest man on earth. I was the father to the most beautiful baby boy I had ever laid my eyes on. My wife, the picture of serenity when she looked at him. She was the most attentive mother I had ever witnessed. I even found it endearing how she seemed to stress about every little thing. She even read the labels and Googled the types of diapers we used to make sure that no dyes would be able to seep into his skin. Was that crazy? Most likely, but it only made me love her harder. Before he was born, we discussed our sleeping arrangement. I knew she was deathly afraid of SIDS, so I bought a small bassinet to keep in our room by the bed. She had read that babies that are in closer proximity to their parents for the first 6 months, which is when the risk of SIDS is highest, are far less likely to succumb. But she had grown so accustomed to my quirks at night that I don't even think that they registered to her as being a potential issue of his sleep cycle. One night, after a particularly brutal argument, again fueled by the fact that neither of us had slept more than 3 straight hours in months, I decided to make a change. I moved an old mattress into the office and slept in there for the night. I know what you're probably thinking. I did it out of martyrdom or to get away from the baby so I could selfishly get some sleep. I can assure you that wasn't exactly the case. Don't get me wrong, the prospect of sleep was definitely welcome, but my intentions were good. I wanted to see if in my absence, even just for a night, would make things any better. Maybe my smoker's cough woke up the baby. Maybe the grinding of my teeth kept him from getting into a good rhythm like it did my wife. So, for a night, I took myself out of the equation. That was the longest he had slept straight through since he was born. The next morning, Kayla found me in the office, asleep on the old single mattress. No sheets, a hoodie rolled up as a pillow, and an old musty Afghan that had an unpleasant, sweet odor of neglect. "Are you fucking serious?" she spat at me. "So you just check out, just leave me alone to deal with him all night? He's your son too." "I know he's my kid too. That's why I left. Did you ever think that's why I came in here?" She paused, obviously puzzled. "I know I'm loud when I sleep. I thought, just maybe, if I left for one night, we could see if he would sleep better." She opened her mouth as if to retort, and after a few seconds, slowly closed it, the realization that I might be onto something dawning on her face. "Let's try it. But if I need help, I need you to come. You can't just take the nights off from being a dad." "Of course, I know that, and that's not my intention." Her face softened. I think both of us were starting to realize that this idea might be the harbinger of the sleep that we both desperately needed. It seemed like a good arrangement. I brought one of the receivers for the baby monitor into the office with me so that I could hear him and jump to if the necessity arose. The need became rare, though, as his sleep duration improved. Every once in a while, I heard him stir in the middle of the night and got ready to jump up and assist my wife, but by the time I got to the door, I heard my wife whispering or quietly singing to him. He was usually back asleep by the time I got back to my bed myself. One night, things seemed to get a little bit more uncomfortable. It was around 1 a.m. and I was still awake. I only remember the hour because it was extremely rare for me to be up nowadays. I was starting to get drowsy and was ready to shut my computer when I heard him starting to stir. It wasn't loud, only a few murmurs, but it was enough to make me perk up. I got up and began walking to the door when I heard the whispering. Something was weird. I knew my wife's voice, but she sounded a little different tonight. Her voice sounded huskier, with a little more bass. Maybe she was especially tired that night. I know sometimes my voice tends to sound deeper when I'm tired, but it wasn't just the sound of her voice that gave me pause. It was what she said. Most nights her whispers were unintelligible, but tonight I could hear her words clearly. "It's okay. You're mine. You're mine. Nothing is going to happen to you because you're mine." The words hung in the air. I felt my brow furrow. What a weird thing to say. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, if it was the wording itself or the inflection. Then the whisper came again. "He's not here, but I am. You're mine." Now I was getting pissed. That was more than a little bit over the line. We had discussed the reason why I was in the other room. It wasn't exactly my ideal situation. I didn't love not sleeping next to my wife, who I shared a bed with for nearly 7 years prior. I didn't like being away from my kid and having to walk to the other end of the house if they needed me. I still woke up when he cried. I wasn't exactly checking out as a parent. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I began quietly marching down the hall to the room. I reached the door and quietly turned the knob. I may have been pissed, but there was no reason to rile the baby up. I'd ask her to come into the other room before I shared my disdain for what she whispered to him. I felt the latch loosen and quietly pushed the door open. The room was dark. The only light was the luminescent glow in the room from the moonlight pouring through the window. It settled near my son's crib. She wasn't there. Nobody was. I crept in, quietly making my way over to the bed. My wife was fast asleep. Maybe my hypothesis was right. Maybe she was still half asleep and that's why her voice sounded like that. Regardless, it was a shitty thing to say. I glanced into the crib and saw my son sleeping like an angel. I turned and quietly made my way out of the room. We could discuss this tomorrow. I broached the topic first thing in the morning. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when my wife bounded in with the baby. "Guess who slept completely through the night for the first time ever?" she happily exclaimed, more a celebration than a question. My son was beaming from ear to ear. I gave him a goofy grin, which, not unexpectedly, caused toothpaste to dribble down my chin. He giggled and reached for me to pick him up. "Oh yeah?" I asked pensively. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and placed my toothbrush next to the sink before grabbing him. "Yep," she said matter-of-factly. "I feel rested for the first time in months. Oh my God, I feel good." I gave my son a quick peck on the cheek before turning to my wife. "Well, I'm glad, but actually he did wake up last night." Her smile faltered a bit. "He did?" "Yeah. I heard him right when I was getting ready to pass out." "Did he fall back asleep?" she asked, puzzled. "He did. You got him to sleep pretty quickly." "I didn't get up with him last night," she said with a puzzled look. "Yes, you did. I heard you. You whispered to him to go back to sleep, but I've got to say, you said some pretty shitty things. Telling him I wasn't there and whatever. That wasn't cool. Did you forget I can hear you?" I looked her right in the eye, but I didn't see any sort of remorse or wild defiance. I didn't see any reaction that made sense. What I saw was puzzlement and a touch of worry. "But I don't remember getting up with him. I don't remember saying anything to him, seriously." She started to get defensive. Maybe I had come across a bit too harsh. I was hurt by what she whispered to him that night, but she genuinely didn't seem to have any sort of recollection. "I don't remember saying anything mean about you. If I did, I'm sorry. Maybe I was still in a dream or something, like maybe I didn't get pulled out of REM sleep all the way and I was just talking nonsense. I really don't remember saying anything." If her words or explanation didn't sell me, the look on her face did. She looked worried, as if she was bracing herself for me not to believe her protests. I, however, genuinely did. "Oh, geez, that must have been it then. You didn't exactly sound like yourself either. You sounded super tired. You probably were just still asleep." I tried to reassure her, but I was also trying to convince myself. Her explanation explained everything, but I couldn't get over how clearly I was able to make out her words. Regardless, I dropped it. The next few weeks were some of the easiest we had since our child was born. Our son was growing so fast. He even began babbling almost incessantly, clearly and obviously trying to talk. In his attempts for communication, he even stumbled across some real words. He beamed from ear to ear every time we praised him for his speech, giggling and laughing, and then finally attempting to recreate what he had just said. Our schedule was working well. We even started to grow accustomed to staying up an extra couple of hours, reclaiming some semblance of our previous habits. Sure, he woke up every once in a while, starting to cry while frantically searching for his pacifier. But once we popped it back into his mouth, he was out like a light again before we could turn around. Then, one night, maybe a month after that weird incident, something happened that chilled us both. One night, while we were cleaning up the house before bed, we heard him rouse over the baby monitor. "I think he lost his binky. You want to get this one?" Kayla asked, not looking up from the table she was diligently washing. "Sure," I replied. I turned and began to make my way to his room when I stopped cold. The sounds on the monitor started to change. What started out as stirring quickly turned to speech. Unintelligible speech, but speech nonetheless. I froze, straining to hear. The voice was croaky and deep. It was uttering a few syllables and stopped. A few more, and then stopped. Then finally, a slow, what could only be described as a cackle. "Baby, do you hear—" "Shh," she rasped. I turned to see Kayla frozen. With every sound that came through that monitor, I saw the color drain from her face. "What the fuck is that?" Without another word, we both sprinted down the hall, stopping short in front of the room. I held up a hand to signal my wife to stop. She seemed to understand and slowed to a creeping gait, being as quiet as she could. The voice was still audible over the monitor. I placed my hand on the knob, turning it as slowly and quietly as I could before pushing the door ever so slowly and listening. As soon as I had it cracked about an inch, the noises stopped and we were plunged into silence. I inched my way into the room, moving slowly to not alert anyone to my presence. My eyes quickly adjusted to the dark. I scanned the room, searching for the source of the noises, but there was nobody there. Suddenly, my son let out the tiniest hint of a whimper. Moving as quietly as I could, I sped to his crib and looked in. He was peacefully asleep with his pacifier laying about 6 inches from him. I turned to the door, and the black shape of my wife hovering near it. I shook my head, trying to imply that there was nothing wrong. As I started to quietly walk out of the room, I heard my son start to babble. Quiet, muffled, croaky, and incoherent syllables fell out of his mouth like a babbling brook, and then he was silent just as quickly. That had to have been the noise we heard. I looked back at the door to see my wife a bit closer now. I held up a finger to indicate that I would be out momentarily before pulling his blanket up tighter around him. He cooed slightly and seemed to snuggle deeper into sleep. I turned to head out of the room again, and the silhouette of my wife was gone. She obviously came to the same conclusion that I did. He was just babbling in his sleep. A freaky sound to be sure, but nothing that really warranted any concern. I slipped out of the room and shut the door quietly. After I felt the latch engage, I scanned the hallway for Kayla, but she was nowhere to be seen. "What was that? Was he just babbling?" I heard her voice waft from the kitchen downstairs. I jogged down the stairs a bit before answering. "Yeah, probably dreaming." "That was the freakiest damn thing that I'd ever heard," she chuckled, obviously trying to regain composure, but still obviously a little freaked out. "You're a good dad. I figured you were watching him for a bit. You were in there a while." The statement sat weird with me. "Well, not that long. I mean, I was only in there like a minute after you left." She shot me a confused look. I didn't go in. I stayed outside. When I heard him babble a bit, I figured that's what it was and came back down here. My blood ran cold as every drop of moisture in my mouth vanished at once. I saw her standing there, didn't I? I saw her silhouette. I know I did. But the room was so dark. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But that shape was so pronounced. My mind fragmented into arguing factions of thoughts as I turned and sprinted back to the room. My wife, obviously confused and startled, called after me. I took the stairs 3 at a time and pivoted at the top to scramble back to the door. I burst in, flicking the light switch on in one fluid move. My eyes darted frantically around the room as I heard my son starting to rouse, obviously startled awake by the light. There was nobody else there. I looked to my left near the door and saw a mound of unfolded laundry. In front of that was a tall lamp which stood around 5 feet. Was it possible that my eyes really were just playing tricks on me? I clicked the light off and eased the door back shut, hoping that he would fall back asleep without assistance. I turned to trudge back down the stairs, embarrassed at my overreacting. Before I could make it 3 steps, I noticed my visibly scared wife at the bottom of the stairs. What happened? What was that? She demanded with a frightened cadence. Nothing. It was just a shadow. I freaked myself out. What do you mean? She was starting to calm down a bit now. When I was in the room, I could have sworn I saw you standing in there too, so when you said you didn't go in, I had to check. Just freaked myself out, that's all. She started to relax a bit more. You sure you didn't see anything? I nodded. All right, well, I'm gonna get ready for bed. Okay, I'm gonna watch some TV and pass out too. She turned to head to the bathroom to do her usual nighttime routine. Hey, baby, she turned when she got to the doorway. I'm sorry I freaked you out. I love you. She smiled as she slipped into the bathroom. I love you too. Don't worry about it. I probably would have been worse. For the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had. That there was something totally wrong. After my wife went to bed, I even took the extra care to check all of the rooms in the house, in the stupid off chance that someone really was in there and slipped out. I already knew what I would find even before I began searching, and I wasn't surprised. No sign of anything wrong. Not even in the closets. I tried to watch TV before I went to bed, but I wasn't able to concentrate. Eventually, after over an hour of channel surfing, I started to feel myself falling asleep. It isn't usually my custom to fall asleep with the TV on, but when a loud cry startled me awake, I realized that's exactly what I did. Yawning deeply, I turned it off and rolled over to go back to sleep. No sooner did I finally get comfortable when I heard the cry again. It wasn't the TV. I tossed off my blanket and rose from bed when I heard it. Shh. Quiet now. You're mine. In a second, all of my emotions from that first night flooded back to me. The way my wife talked about me, the way she seemed to impugn my parenting, the way she talked to him like she was declaring sole ownership. I felt my anger and indignation rising. Fuming, I made my way down the hall to the bathroom that I once shared with my wife and child and opened the door. I stepped into the dark room. The dark silhouette of my wife was standing over my son's crib. I heard her rasping shush sounds. I didn't hear any stirring from my son. Hey, everything all right? I whispered. The figure of my wife froze, straightened up, and looked at me. I couldn't explain why, but my blood ran cold. She lifted a finger to where her face would be and let out a shh. I stood frozen. This wasn't like her at all. The slow moving, the shushing me with no other words. Then came the sound that filled me with dread. "Baby, is everything okay?" my wife asked from the bed. My eyes darted to the spot in the bed where my wife laid, starting to sit up to see what was the matter. I tried to reply. I tried to move. I tried to do anything, but my body just wouldn't obey. Dread kept me stuck in place like a fly to flypaper. Finally, I was able to croak out the faintest of replies. "Get Jack. Grab him and run." My tight, pleading voice escaped my throat. Fear kept me paralyzed as I saw my wife noticing the shape in the dark. The shape, in turn, slowly turned its head to notice my wife. To her credit, though, my wife, unlike me, was not frozen. With a speed that could rival the flash, she leaped from her bed and scooped up our son before I could suck in a breath. By the time I was exhaling, she was sprinting past the shade and toward the door. The shade snapped its head back to me and took a step that seemed more like a glide. An abstract, shadowy hand reached out, beckoning. "He's mine. He's mine," it rasped. It took another step. "Mine." Another step. "Give him." It was seeming to move quicker now. To my horror, I realized I was still planted firmly to the same spot. I involuntarily started shaking. "Give him now." It shrieked the final word. The voice turned from an ominous, feminine-sounding whisper to a menacing, deep-throated bark. All at once, the world began again. Simultaneously, the shape lunged at me as I finally found the strength to move. I felt icy fingers rake my shoulder as I sprinted from the room and down the stairs after my wife and son. The door was open when I got there. I sprinted through into the cool damp of the late night to the side of my frantically crying family. "What the fuck was that?" my wife screamed. "What was that?" "I don't know," I stammered back. Porch lights started flicking on around us. We could see heads emerging in the windows, obviously checking to see if everything was all right. My eyes drifted back up to our bedroom window, slowly afraid of what I would see. The shade was there. It was there, and it was staring back at me. Just as before, it outwardly had no defining features, but somewhere deep inside me, even if I didn't realize it, I knew I was staring into its black eyes. The shape was black on black, but I knew. And my body did as well as I involuntarily released anything that was in my bladder. It didn't beckon, it didn't point, it didn't move. It stared down at me completely motionless, and I had never been more afraid. The police arrived within minutes. They asked us what was wrong and searched the house thoroughly. Every light was on and every nook and cranny was checked, but there was no sign of an intruder. Despite the complete lack of evidence to our statements, I felt that one of the officers in particular believed us. Maybe it was the fact that we were barefooted in our night clothes outside or the urine stain in my shorts. He offered to sit out in his car and keep an eye on the house tonight to make sure whatever was there before didn't return. We thanked him, but politely declined. See, there was no way we were going to sleep in that house. Not tonight or any other night. With all the lights on and the presence of so many armed officers, I felt safe enough to go back inside and pack a bag. I grabbed our cell phones, some clothing for tomorrow, and changed the clothes I already had on as the cold wetness was extremely uncomfortable. The bedroom was cold when I entered. I made it a point to move as fast as I could, throwing clothes in the bag without even looking to see what I had grabbed. When the bag was packed and I was changed, I started to leave when I stopped short. My son's bottle. I turned to grab it from the nightstand next to his crib, but my hand froze inches from it as I heard a raspy breath coming through the baby monitor.
Where are you going, Daniel? Where are you taking my Jack?
I heard the voice rasp. The husky breath panted into the receiver. It seemed to blur the line between sounding perverted and malicious. I felt my legs start to give way as the rasping turned into a cackle. I grabbed everything and scrambled out of the room as quickly as I could, never looking back. Something told me if I looked behind me, I would be staring into the black, vacuous face of whatever it was in our house. I stumbled outside to a sea of patrol lights and the horrified expression on Kayla's face. Tears still stained her cheeks, but fresh ones started to form when she saw my expression. We left that night. The police were kind enough to allow us to make our statement down at the station. I reassured them that I knew what I was saying sounded insane, but every word of it was true. Although I could tell that nobody truly believed me, they at least didn't mock or chastise me for misusing their resources. We stayed with Kayla's mother for a time while I sold the house. Luckily, it didn't take long. Before we knew it, we were moving into a new home on the other side of town, far from the horrifying nights that we shared at our first house. That was almost a year ago. I'm writing this all down because of a call that I received from the police last night. You might have seen it on the news if you live in the same town that we do. The family that bought our house was found murdered. The news reports were understandably vague on the details, but the police gave a more detailed story. The husband was found with his neck and both legs broken. The wife was found strangled to death. Their 9-year-old daughter was never found. That's not what will keep me up at night, though. The part that, I can promise you, has made it so I'll never sleep again was the note they found carved into the drywall. Where's my Jack, Daniel? What's up, guys? This is Anthony. If you're noticing, that story was a little more edited than we originally promised, but after doing the dry read of it, I realized that it deserved to be actually edited and cleaned up and treated like a normal narration. So, once again, if you didn't listen to part 1 of this episode, that's over on the Nerdynomicon Podcast, which our guest Robbie is the host of. So go check out part 1, and if you haven't listened, you should subscribe, all that jazz. That story was called Sleepless, and it was written by Robbie to kind of illustrate his fear of baby monitors. So go show him some love. There's going to be all those links down in the show notes that I promised. And thanks again for joining us for another episode of What Scares Us and another episode of 31 Days of Horror. And again, we'll see you next time so that we can find out together what scares you.